Greetings, everyone. My name is Sarah Barnes, and on behalf of Campbell & Company, I would like to welcome you to a pipeline for the future, building a strong mid-level giving program. Thank you for joining us. We have a little bit of an echo, and I don't know exactly why, but I think it's gone, so that's good. That's technology for you. But before we begin today's presentation, I'd like to quickly go through some logistics for those of you who may be new to our webinars. So first, you can close any programs that are running on your computer. We recommend calling in with a telephone instead of using your computer speakers. Move your cell phone away from your computer, and if you experience any visual issues, you can send a chat to Campbell & Company or contact GoToWebinar at the number on your screen. And if you could just advance the screen, that would be great. So today's webinar will last, there's the number 1-800-263-6317. Today's webinar will last 60 minutes, and you'll earn 1 continuing education credit, and that is good with your participation with CFRE International. Within the next 24 hours, you'll receive an email from GoToWebinar that includes information on how to download your certificate. We won't be sharing slides from today's presentation, but we will be sending a link to the recording and a follow-up email from GoToWebinar. We do welcome questions throughout, so please use the questions box in the GoToWebinar panel on the right side, and we'll also hold time at the end, and I look forward to moderating those questions. And now I'd like to turn it over to Senior Consultant Dermont Smith and Consultant Jacqueline Peters.
Hi, my name is Dermont Smith. I'm a senior consultant with Campbell & Company. I have been with the firm for more than 2.5 years, and prior to joining our firm, I was with World Vision, where I learned quite a bit about mid-level giving. I was the national director for the mid-level giving program for over 10 years at World Vision. And I will turn it over to Jacqueline to introduce herself as well.
Hi, Jacqueline Peters. I am a consultant at Campbell & Company based in our Chicago office. I've been with Campbell & Company for just about 5 years, or coming up on 5 years. Prior to my work here at Campbell & Company, I focused in this mid-level space at Memorial Sloan Kettering in New York. And since being at Campbell & Company, I work with a variety of different organizations in this space and otherwise. So Dermont, I think you're going to take a minute to introduce our speaker with us today, Jason.
Yes, our guest speaker today is Jason Dick. He's the Vice President of Donor Relations at Christa Ministries. Christa Ministries is a humanitarian organization comprised of 7 distinct units, each with their own mission and vision. Jason leads a team of mid-level and major gift officers, and his team raises money with the intention of moving people from poverty into abundance. Jason loves meeting new and experienced fundraisers alike. He believes that there is an exciting career to be had in fundraising and wants to encourage fundraisers of all backgrounds in this profession. Hence, Jason is here today. Welcome, Jason, and please say hello to the group.
Thank you, Dermont and Jacqueline. I'm really excited to be here and love the work of mid-level donor fundraising. I love getting to walk with people in this journey, seeing some incredible fruit, and really excited about being with you today. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Jason, for sharing with us today. Let's talk a little bit about what we'll cover today. We will talk about why mid-level donors and focus on mid-level donors is important. We will go through the nuts and bolts of a mid-level program. We'll talk a little bit about how to establish a mid-level giving program, and also discuss what a mature mid-level program looks like as well. In addition, we'll have some time for Q&A around these topics. Mid-donor programs range from the highest annual fund donors to the smallest major donors. Wow, that really just captures the essence of what a mid-level program is. A mid-level program should be considered a bridge between your annual fund and your major donor programs. You probably noticed that this definition of mid-level donors has no ranges in it. A mid-level program can represent different things to different organizations. In my experience, I have seen individual mid-level giving ranges for newer and developing programs to be between $500 and $2,500 annually, to as much as $10,000 to $100,000 annually for fully mature, high-end programs. Regardless of the level, these donors demonstrate a greater affinity to your organizations and give different reasons for giving versus your primary donors. And they need to have a more personalized engagement strategy. So let's look at the importance of mid-level donors. They can help you to identify and qualify major donors. Mid-level giving programs with an emphasis on connecting with donors, primarily over the phone, allow donors to build personal connections with your organizations, especially when you have a dedicated point of contact for them to develop a relationship within the organization. And organizations that have committed resources and special attention to mid-level donors have really seen it pay off in the way of retention and also in the way of revenue growth. Jason, at Krista, what's been the most important impact of mid-level programs for you?
Thank you, Dermot. Well, there's three areas that I would say we have found to be really valuable at Krista. So one of them has been in the area of qualifying donor relationships. So our mid-level teams will spend a lot of time looking at relationships that have just started with us and walking them through, are they interested in connecting with us? Do they have the ability to give? Do they want to walk a journey with us? And that qualifying conversation has been really important for building into our pipeline. And what our pipeline really is it's taking people from annual fundraising all the way through to kind of major and mega gifts. And our mid-level lives right in the very middle of the pipeline, qualifying relationships, building relationships with people to pull them into that major gifts pipeline. And the third area I would say is there's a lot of relationships that are people that will consistently give $1,000 every year. That's the max they can give, and we want to retain, we want to engage, we want to keep them cared for, but we can't afford to see them face-to-face and do a heavy face-to-face engagement strategy. And so it's worked really well to have a mid-level program that can care for them, engage them, and that kind of thing. Let me just share maybe two examples of kind of two mid-level donors that became major donors, and one of them's actually moved back into our mid-level process. Just to kind of illustrate that a little bit, there's a donor that I picked up from one of our mid-level team when I first started at Krista about 6 years ago, and he is a commercial or a residential real estate builder in Vancouver, British Columbia. And he makes money when he sells homes, and he doesn't have any income when he doesn't sell homes. So when he's selling homes, he's making lots of money. And he likes to give a % of that money away every time he sells a home. And I found there's a lot of opportunity there. Started a journey with him, talked with him, and his son ended up joining our board. And through taking him out of the mid-level space into a very focused major donor program, he increased his giving from about $20,000 all the way up to about $150,000 in a matter of a year and a half. He's now in a season where they haven't sold a home in a year. The market is kind of frozen in the space that he lives in, and he hasn't given a $100,000 gift in a couple of years. And so we have now kind of moved him back into a holding place where we're caring for him. We're treating him probably more like a mid-level donor right now until the market rebounds and we can engage him in a more focused, personal way. And part of that has been because of his desires too. He doesn't want us to do a really heavy face-to-face strategy when he's not able to contribute. One other story, and then I'll pass it back over to you, Dermot. There's a donor that I've worked with for most of my time here. He's in medical sales, And so he has a great salary. It's a commission-based role. He's consistently given kind of right at the edge of what our line is. So our mid-level donor gives from $500 to $5,000. And he, some years has given 5, some years has given 3. His employer will match the dollars, so that's doubling the impact there. And he is retiring this year. So he is closing out his work with the pharmaceutical company he's been working with and is retiring. So he will go from being a donor that I'd worked with a couple times a year from major gift capacity to back into the mid-level program to be spoken with on the phone and engaged and cared for. And it's been really healthy for us to have those relationships pass back and forth and to have a team and people that can engage and care at multiple levels. I hope that helps, Dermont.
Thank you, Jason. That really helps us to see the collaboration and the need for collaboration between your mid-level program and your major donor program. And it highlights the importance of continuing to cultivate those donors at a high level, even when their situation may change. So thank you for sharing those.
Absolutely.
Jacqueline, if you will advance. So let's look at the pillars of a mid-level program. A thriving mid-level program features key ingredients. Every mid-level program should start with an assessment. So you should take a look at the number of donors that you have available giving in this space. You should do a wealth screening on these donors so that you can understand who the target audience is and how you will be defining your mid-level donors. A mid-level donor program needs to be a strategic priority from the leadership. If the program is to receive a consistent, sustained stream of funding, it's appropriate that you dedicate resources to a mid-level program. And like any development initiative, a mid-level program requires specialized staff focused on managing mid-level relationships. And how do we do that? Through a donor recognition program that is geared towards engaging this specific audience. Mid-level donors need to receive customized recognition to establish a sense of belonging and to build effective long-term relationships with the organization. Your communications should be refined so that your mid-level donors and prospects their specific interests are addressed, and this ensures that the messaging that you share is both efficient and effective. So when you think about a mid-level program and, how many donors would I need to start a mid-level program, there's a sweet spot for a caseload. A typical sweet spot for a caseload will be 600 to 800 donors. And these donors would be donors that would be identified from your assessment and pulled from your annual fund. Staffing a new program, let's say you have those 6 to 800 donors that you've identified. Staffing of one person would be sufficient to be able to reach out to those particular donors. But if you have a little bit less, I have also seen in my experience where organizations have hired a retired major gifts officer or someone that has been involved in sales before and brought them on in a part-time capacity. So those are some of the things that you want to consider as pillars of a mid-level program.
Great, thank you, Dermont. So most of us are familiar with this donor pyramid, especially as it exists on the left, representing our annual donors as well as our major donors. We don't typically, however, see this mid-level broken out. And as you can see on the right, it really is an area, an important area, that can simultaneously support both the top end and the bottom end of your fundraising efforts. So it has the capacity to both elevate your annual giving as well as cultivate major gifts and build that healthy pipeline that all of us are looking for, both for fundraising efforts today as well as for future fundraising efforts. So now that we've talked a little bit about the components and what a mid-level program is, we'd like to hear from all of you, where you are in the development of your mid-level program. So we have a poll that has just popped up on your screen. So if all of you can take it and indicate where your organization's mid-level program is, we can take a couple of seconds here and just see where we're all at.
I feel like we need waiting music.
I would think. I don't think anyone wants me to do that.
I was hoping Dermot would sing.
Do.
Great. So it looks like, and I'm sorry, I'm off screen just for a second so I can see the results. It looks like we have about an even number between yes, no, and in process, with a little bit more focused on programs that already exist and programs that are in process. So hopefully, as we move forward and we talk really about the engagement of this group, for those of you who already have a program, you can hopefully find some areas for expanding that program and taking it into a deeper level. And those of you that are building a program will provide some insight into what the components might look like for engagement. So if you can think about mid-level donor outreach really as that the highlights or the best of outreach from your annual fund and major gift programs, it really takes and adapts what we know to work well in both spaces and customizes it for this group in the middle, really to evaluate where they're most comfortable fitting into the organization, both from a communication perspective as well as a contribution perspective. So mid-level outreach typically adapts the generic messaging from an annual fund program, customizes it, and then supplements that with that personal outreach from a major gift program. And it uses all of the channels of communication, which allows a mid-level program to have such a deep, a large volume of prospects and a deep pool of mid-level donors. So you're using the digital marketing from annual funds. You're using the direct mail pieces that are automated through your organization, obviously adapted in a slightly more customized version of those. And then you're also supplementing it with the one-on-one meetings. But because of the volume of donors who exist in this mid-level area, it's really focused on phone outreach as opposed to individual one-on-one outreach and major donor. So these mid-level donors, they really give annually. A lot of them give annual gifts that are larger than what they typically would have given if received, if they fell into the annual fund portion of your outreach. So they give annually. Most of them have given for years and years to your organization. So they look like major gift prospects for you. And they want to receive that high impact type of communication from you. And they want to make gifts to high impact priorities that they can see immediate results. So it's not the lengthy stewardship process of a major donor prospect. It's really about showing that immediate high impact of the priorities that they're supporting. Jason, we'd love to hear from you on what messaging you think has worked best or you've seen work well at Krista.
Great, absolutely. Well, I would say we definitely have a little bit of in annual fundraising, mid-level, and major donor that really fits in with what you're talking about. From an annual fund perspective, we do a lot of direct mail. We do a lot of paper-based and email-based engagement, and it's very mass-focused, very general. It's usually at kind of the $30 or $40, sometimes $30 or $40 monthly type level. For our major donors, we do a lot more personal, direct engagement. We'll have custom proposals that we work with. Our focus with the annual fund is very direct, momentary impact. With our major donors, it's very much your gift implements the strategy that we're all driving for as an organization. So it's very focused around how we can't have any success as an organization without this gift from you as a major donor. And our mid-level program lives in the middle between the two of those. So from the what they're asked approach, they kind of get a more focused 3 to 6 month process, but it's a mailing that they'll respond to, and it will have very much of a direct impact piece to it. But at the same time, we still tie it into how they tie into the larger strategy of the organization, and they get a lot more of a personal, engaged approach because they're being spoken to individually and directly beyond just what they've received via the phone or via the email or via mail. And we'll talk with them a lot on the phone. And what we're trying to do is really understand what their passions are, why they've made the gifts they've made, so that we can cater and focus their giving towards those kind of things, so that what they're hearing about really meets their heart's desire, really ties in with what they're interested in. So we provide a layer on top of what's happening with the annual fund program that really blends well, either at keeping people in the mid-level space or growing them into the major donor space. And a lot of that customization has a very personal component to it. And what I've found is that a lot of that revolves around creating a very specific ask that's targeted kind of voice to voice over the phone with those individuals. We'll oftentimes have to call multiple times to get in front of them, to have that dialogue, to do some of that kind of qualifying type relationship conversations. But it also allows us to really cater the ask to where their interest is. So it allows us to be able to say, you know, I know your passion is working with children, or I know your passion is working in this specific country, and you've received kind of an appeal that talks about it, but let me drill in a little deeper on what I already know about you and how this connects with your interests. So that's kind of how we've built out our program and communicated with mid-level donors, a little different than both annual and major gifts.
Great, thank you, Jason. So building on that, Jason talked a little bit about how there's this phone-based relationship that's being built. And that phone-based relationship really follows the same principles as relationship management for a major gift program. Slightly tweaked to support the volume of mid-level prospects that exist within an organization. So the identification and qualification are fairly similar to how it works in a major gift program. However, identification is tailored to indicators for mid-level prospects as opposed to just major gift prospects, and sometimes heavily even swayed by trends that have been identified in the organization over time, pointing to perhaps what an ideal mid-level donor looks like or an ideal major gift prospect looks like. So using those trends as a basis, not just the wealth indicators that we typically see. And then in qualification, again, it's back to what Jason just said about the phone. Because the volume, there is such a significant volume, qualification happens via phone as opposed to in person as we would see in a major gift program. So it's both scaled to fit the organization as well as the mid-level program. The cultivation of this group is really focused over the phone, and it's focused on making this group of individuals feel like an insider. So that happens in a couple of different ways, both in creating a customized group, so a catalyst circle, an insiders group, or something like that, as well as marketing and branding that insiders group and creating special opportunities and VIP access for them. So perhaps they're invited to a major gift donor event, or special events are created for this group that highlight some of those areas that are most important for them to support or most important to them. So really trying to create cultivation opportunities that meet the donor where they're most interested in supporting the organization. In solicitation, because it is annually, you move quickly back into the identification and qualification and cultivation of the mid-level prospect. But the stewardship of a mid-level donor and quite frankly of a mid-level program is really critical and perhaps one of the most important pieces, because this movement in and out of annual giving to mid-level giving to major giving is really where a mid-level program can add the most value to your organization. Moving prospects up and migrating them to major gifts, retaining them in a mid-level program, or downgrading them to annual giving. And this is all based on that relationship that's being built between the donor and the organization through the mid-level program. And all of the ways that we've talked about communicating with them across the different channels and all of the different modes of communication that we have to see where they fit best, where they're most comfortable from a contribution perspective, but also just where their priorities align.
Thank you, Jacqueline. After we've determined where the mid-level donor fits best, in order for us to really understand who the best candidates are for a mid-level program, we are going to consider several factors. The best way to find mid-level donors is to use data that's beyond just giving history to identify prospects. Some of the considerations will be, do donors have the capacity to give at a sustained level and for a sustained period of time? Is this donor really passionate or excited about the projects that are offered by the mid-level program? Do I have the correct contact information to build a strong relationship with this mid-level donor? And then also, our donors in the annual fund who have demonstrated the ability to give at higher levels, do they have some of the same attributes as donors that have been strong in the mid-level program? Those are your prospects for your mid-level program. So as we take a look at this, as you look at, earlier we talked about doing an assessment and using wealth data to determine who would make great mid-level donors. And using that, it's important as well to take a look at market and observation data to provide context. For example, it'll help us to identify the prospects that have a higher likelihood to give. Oftentimes, when you take a look at wealth data, there is a component attached that takes a look at their property ownership. So, for instance, someone who lives in California that may own $1 million house may not necessarily have the capacity to give as much based on their wealth screening and data as someone that owns a $300,000 house in Texas. So it's important for us to really consider the location, consider factors similar to that. And getting to know mid-level donors is going to be important too. Getting to know what they care most about. And in my experience, I have also seen donor surveys help with being able to effectively identify who the appropriate mid-level donors should be, and then also what type of strategy we should use, what types of offers we should create, and help us to better understand what the donor preferences are, and just build an overall mid-level donor strategy to approach this audience. One thing that I want you to be aware of as well is that it's really important to also consider the one-to-one conversations that your mid-level donor gift officers are having with their donors, and the information that they're hearing from that audience. This can give you deeper insights into the donor's individual passions and their desires for partnering with your organization. I just really want to touch on access to this particular group as well, because access is another key component for this group, whether it's through phone conversations, emails, correspondence, text, social media. All of these contact points and touch points really help us to advance the donor relationships. And we will want to capture that information and as much of that information as possible, so that as we continue to develop those relationships, we can strengthen those relationships and know that we can advance the donor as well. Jason, what have you found to be most valuable as an indicator for a strong mid-level donor?
Sure. Well, I would say there's two major areas that we look at as we try to ask that question around what is the most valuable indicator. One is really giving, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. And the other is their willingness to engage, kind of the propensity, a little bit of what you talked about. When it relates to giving, we're asking questions like, have they made a gift in the last 12 months? Sometimes that's a rolling 12 months. Sometimes that's a fiscal year. Our fiscal year is from July to June. And so we'll say, do they make a gift, a single gift of $500 or more? Did they make a cumulative gift of $1,000 or more? And then how recent was their gift? So if they gave 3 years ago, then they're probably not going to be a part of our program anymore. But if they've given within the last year, and sometimes we'll even bring that out to the last 2 years, especially with some of the larger givers, and keep them engaged and keep them plugged in. As it relates to willingness to engage, what we've found is that some people don't want to talk to us and some people do. And if they don't want to talk to us, then you can spend so much time trying to talk with them that you end up missing opportunities to talk with others. And so we will walk through, that's where a lot of the qualifying comes in with us. We will be really intentional, especially out of the gate when they've initially given, to get them on the phone and have a conversation. So sometimes we'll call even as much as 5, 7, even more times in a span of even a couple of weeks, just to try to have a conversation with them to get a feel for what they care about. Are they going to engage? And if they choose not to engage with us, then we'll pull them out of the system and process that they were in. I would agree, Dermont, you talked a little bit about wealth screening. We have struggled and asked a lot of questions about wealth screening. So what we've ended up deciding, we've used Wealth Engine, we've used iWave, and a handful of different tools. We will use the very topmost wealth indicators. So usually if the wealth screening tool tells us that they could make a regular gift of, $15,000 to $50,000 annually, we will consider putting them into a mid-level portfolio if they've given a smaller gift. But if the wealth screening tool tells us, oh, they could make a $500 gift, but they're only giving us $20, we have not pulled them into our system. And a lot of that has to do with the conditions and the way that the data is pulled that Dermont already mentioned about the difference in how assets are treated and how housing is treated in different places. And that's just practically what we've kind of found is we don't want to miss the opportunity to talk with a major or mega donor, and wealth screening can help us find a few of those people, but it hasn't been as good of a tool of finding mid-level donors that are not existing mid-level donors and treating them as such.
Great. Thank you, Jason. Now that we've talked a little bit about how we identify mid-level donors and what are some of the strategies for drilling down to who make the best mid-level donors, how do you manage and track those donors once you've identified who they are? So once you've identified who your prospects are, Moves Management provides a framework that helps you and your mid-level gift officers to manage his or her time, plan strategically, forecast, set priorities, and track and monitor their progress. And it's important for you to capture the information that you are having as you interact with donors in your database so that you are able to continue to advance that relationship. And while you're securing gifts for the mid-level program today, you are also developing a pipeline for major donors and a pipeline for future donors. It's important as we are thinking about this, and we have mid-level gift officers that are working in our program, that we equip those officers to be able to make personalized connections with their donors and with their prospects who have a high likelihood of giving and securing multi-year giving commitments. And how do we do that? Through appropriate cultivation, reaching out to understand how they want to be involved with our organization, what their preferences are, how often they like to be communicated with, how do they like to communicate. Is it that they would like to communicate via the phone? Would they like to communicate via email? Or in my experience, I've even seen where donors like to text back and forth, or even use social media like LinkedIn and also Facebook. So just really thinking about ways to connect with these donors. The other part of this is that continuum of donors. So while Jason had touched on this earlier about how donors move back and forth between the different giving programs, the annual, mid-level, and also major giving programs, looking for opportunities as donors give you indications, whether it's an indication based on their increased giving to the organization, or whether it's an interest in a larger opportunity, or if you find some bit of information through your contact and touch with a donor, that this donor is a donor that could benefit from a higher level of touch, it's important to think about how we upgrade those donors and consider teaming with someone on the major donor team, or teaming with someone on the mid-level donor team if you're on the major donor team where a situation with a donor has changed, as Jason had illustrated earlier. And then that's really what your portfolio reviews are going to consist of as well. Making time to consider which donors should move from the annual fund on a regular basis is critical to continuing to keep that flow in the pipeline of donors moving up and giving them those opportunities to give at higher levels. Mid-level programming, continually reviewing its portfolio to look at those donors that have demonstrated the ability to move into the major donor portfolio. And just using that data to inform that review and the process is important. So let's think about how we communicate with mid-level donors. A mid-level program actually serves as a hybrid between your major and annual giving programs. As Jacqueline had alluded to earlier, it's going to use the high-touch components of a major donor cultivation, and then also use some of the best practices from a direct marketing or an annual fund program as well. Mid-level donors really need to hear a compelling message that's really created specifically for them. They need to know why their gift is important and how a larger gift is going to allow them to have an even greater impact. So it's important to optimize your case for support and prepare your mid-level gift officers for personal interactions. Some examples of preparing your mid-level gift officers is once you've actually determined what your offer is going to be, is really taking the time to sit down with your mid-level gift officers and help them to understand the offer completely and give them context for communicating with their donors. Just really looking and seeking to determine, what your donors are interested in, where do they want to make that impact, and, how do they prefer to receive their communications. And once you're acquiring this information, it's important to be sure to collect that data and personalize that for your interactions.
Thank you, Dermot. So we spent a lot of time talking about the engagement opportunity for a mid-level group, and we've alluded to a mid-level gift officer. So what is a mid-level gift officer? How does it differ than the major gift officer or annual giving stewards within your organization? And typically, these mid-level gift officers are going to be the largest investment of your mid-level program. They serve as the face of the organization to this vast group of supporters. As Dermot had mentioned, portfolios in the range of 600 to 800 donors. So their relationship management is really focused on the phone rather than in person. While this investment of time may be slightly different depending on the size of your mid-level program, typically a mid-level gift officer will spend the majority of their time in phone conversations doing that relationship management building with slightly less time in-person meetings and slightly less time donor touches. So that would be emails and thank you letters and updates and things of that nature. So phone, again, is really the emphasis here for a mid-level gift officer, and this breakdown may slightly change. Given the size of portfolios, one way for mid-level gift officers to prioritize and maintain the portfolio is to tier it. This tiering looks slightly different, again, depending on the size of your organization's mid-level giving program and the size of your mid-level giving donor base. But an example here, and it will follow some of the same trends, an example here is prioritizing the top 10% in Tier 1. So these donors are your best major gift prospects. And they're those donors that you can easily get in front of, whether that be by phone or in person, and you've had success in upgrading their annual gift. Tier 2 are those donors who look the same, a larger group, but they look the same as Tier 1, however, are not as easily accessible. So you have a more difficult time getting them on the phone. When you do, you have great conversations and you move forward and you move through the process closer to making a solicitation. However, it's difficult to get in touch with them. So really the focus around this second tier is going to be around an upgraded annual gift and retention. And then finally, Tier 3 is the balance of your portfolio. So the largest group of donors within this 600 to 800 range. And these donors are really there for qualification purposes. So they may look like a major gift prospect, but we're looking to make smaller upgrades with them. We're hoping to build a personal relationship and just get them to make another annual gift, hopefully at a slightly increased level than they typically do. So we've talked about a lot of different responsibilities for a mid-level gift officer. So it really brings in some of the responsibilities of an annual fund officer as well as a major gift officer. So who is the ideal candidate for a mid-level gift officer? And really, it can be a couple of things. First, it can be a growth opportunity for individuals in an annual giving program who aspire to be a major gift officer. It's a great opportunity for them to both leverage the skills that they've grown within an annual fund program and build those that are necessary within a major gifts program. As Dermot mentioned earlier, this is also a way to engage retiring major gift officers or even those who are looking to make a career transition and work from sales or other areas of the for-profit world. So there's a range of different skills needed here. So Jason, we'd love to hear from you in your experience what you've seen to be the most important qualities for successful mid-level gift officers.
Absolutely. Well, these are really great ways of looking at mid-level giving officers. I really support the way that you guys have talked about the program and how important it is that you organize things differently as a mid-level officer than you do as a major gifts staff or as an annual fund staff. And a lot of what you're doing is you're building trust. And voice-to-voice is an incredible tool to build trust. There's something that people respond to when they hear, oh, I know I'm being spoken to personally, that's deeper than just a letter that they've received. And so there's a lot of power in that. And what's really happening is you're building a relationship, you're having a conversation. And so what I found with my team is those tiers have been super important. And helping people say, well, how do I steward this time? Everybody is amazing. I want to talk to everybody. How do I split that out? And so we've had to be really intentional about saying that top tier is the future financial opportunity that we have to do our missional work. You need to focus heavily in that space. It's important. It's part of your own stewardship of the relationships you care for. And we've wanted them to lean in relationally in a deeper way there. And the second tier has been a little bit less, and the third tier a little bit less. But I haven't really answered your question yet. The major thing to me, when I think about hiring a staff or what staff are the most successful, we've looked at a lot of numbers. We've looked at how successful are they at selling, how persuasive are they, how engaging are they super charismatic, are they super quiet? And the thing that has made the biggest difference over everything has been diligence. So it's been those people that have been really intentional and really tenacious about doing the work. So what we have found is I could put a incredibly tenacious and diligent person against someone that I think is the most charismatic, persuasive person in the world, and there's a negligible difference between the two of their work if they've both been tenacious. And so what I've found is that kind of polite persistence in engaging in a relationship continually and multiple times is the most valuable skill that you can have as a mid-level giving officer. I have introverts that are doing a great job in this space. I have people that are right out of school that are doing a great job in this space. And then I also have people that are super extroverted and they've done this for a long time and they have less of a desire to get into the nitty-gritty of the work, and there's not as much success in that space. So I've really found that it's that diligence and that willingness to really lean into the work that they're doing.
Great. Thank you, Jason.
Yes, thank you, Jason and Jacqueline. Let's now that we've talked about some of the components of a mid-level program and talked about who might make a great candidate for a mid-level gift officer and what those attributes have been and how we attribute the success to mid-level candidates. Let's talk a little bit about strategies for the program. And the survey pointed out that we have a diverse audience. We have an audience that already has a mid-level program in place, and it's actually divided in thirds almost interestingly. There are those that have a program in place, those that are considering a program, and those that may not, that may have a mature program. So let's just take a look at as we're considering establishing either a new program or growing our current program or even refining our mature program, what are some of the tips that may not have been shared earlier that will help you to advance your program? So with a new program, just really taking a look at measuring the success that you're able to have as you start and capturing the things that work well are really critical in those early stages as you're setting up a new program. And I can't emphasize enough the importance of developing a phone strategy for engaging donors and training your mid-level gift officers to be able to listen actively and be intuitive over the phone, listen for key messages that a donor may share with you. Oftentimes you'll hear something like, hear a donor say something like, I really wish I could do more. And just being politely persistent and delving into that is a key to advancing that relationship and learning more about moving that donor forward and advancing them. In a growing program, take a look at developing campaigns and many campaigns designed to specifically speak to what the donor wants to do and the type of impact that the donor wants to have, delving into their passions and determining if a multiplier, that a gift multiplier and leverage giving is something that is of interest to that donor. And just really refining the collaboration across the organization can be key to continuing to take that growing program to the next level. And then as you have a mature program, taking a look at doing an additional survey. So you may have conducted a survey to start your program, but it's important to have refreshed data. And in my experience, what's worked well for me and for others that I've had an opportunity to talk with is taking a look at conducting a survey every 3 years or so that the data is refreshed and you understand who your audience is and are able to speak to that audience and continue to refine your program. Look at ways to identify new opportunities that can create impact, and just being able to speak directly with your gift officers, hear what they've heard over the phone, and incorporate that into your strategy as well. And then just really taking a look and reviewing the successes and what's worked well, and taking a look at what hasn't, and really seeking and delving into that and looking for opportunities for improvement and implementation. So when you're thinking about your program, one thing that I want to encourage you to do is please be sure to visit our Campbell & Company site and download our mid-level giving maturity model. And this will allow you to score your program and take a look at where you are on that spectrum as well. So now what I'm going to do, because Jason has really been great about sharing what's happening, I want to hear more from Jason about his program at Christa Ministries.
And I just want to quickly chime in before you start, Jason. So sorry, we do have a number of questions, so I just want you all to be aware. Just let me know when you're ready.
Thank you.
Fantastic. And I want to get to the questions as quickly as we can. So there was a few things that I really wanted to add in, and then we can get over there. So let's try to do this in like 90 seconds. One of the things I want you guys to hear is that you can do a mid-level program when you have a small shop. At Christa, we have some teams that are one person and all they do is mid-level as well as annual funds. And we have other teams like World Concern and like our radio teams where World Concern has 6 donor reps that are doing mid-level work, and media has 2 donor reps that are doing that space. So you can really take this program from a really small half-time role to something that's a lot more robust through a larger organization. In my organization, most of my donor reps raise around $300,000. We have portfolios of right around 500 names. And I'd already mentioned that we kind of look at that $500 to $5,000 level. I wanted to just show you guys 2 different examples of some of our appeals. So the first one, you can see kind of how we break out the ask. And this is very similar to what you'll see with a lot of annual fund appeals where you've got kind of an ABC that they can choose from. What my team will do is they choose one of those. So they will choose, A, B, or C, ask 1, 2, or 3, and they will make a specific ask to that one thing over the phone. What has been the most important part of our program has been making a verbal ask to people. And it's not a soft ask, it's not a general ask, it's a, hey Larry, I know you care about this, will you give $500? And that $500 is oftentimes double what they've given before. Sometimes it's not quite that high, but what I've found is that it forces them to say, will I give, and will I be challenged to give at that level? And when they say yes, we write it down so that we have an opportunity to respond and follow up and make sure that that gift comes to fruition. And then I'll show you one more piece. And this is just an example of our larger letter. What I wanted to kind of call out here is that there's a specific impact, and it's very much the impact's happening right now. So we try to design our appeals in such a way that say, you can do something right at this moment to make a difference. And then our donor reps, our mid-level team will follow up very specifically around that appeal and say, hey, I want to just challenge you. I want to make sure you've read it. I want to sure you've heard this story. This is the specific impact you can have. Will you do X? That's kind of a quick little snapshot. I want to give us a chance for questions, and I'm happy to answer other things offline too, but thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. That was great. So we'll move into questions, and Dermot, perhaps you can moderate them as we head into our final minutes here together. So would you say that identifying the mid-level donors is primarily with the intent of moving them up to major donors, or do you expect them to stay where they are?
So I'll take a shot at this, and I'll welcome Jason and also Jacqueline's responses. But it's both. You will find that there are donors that have elevated their giving, and they're perfectly fine giving at that level. They have the capacity to give at a sustained mid-level throughout the year. And there are donors that will do test gifts to the organization. And oftentimes, those test gifts come in the form of a larger gift or an increased amount of giving over a period of time. And so they will elevate up into our mid-level giving program. And that's why it's critically important to be able to understand how the donor wants to be involved with the organization and what type of impact they would like to have. So I would say it's both. So there are going to be donors that are going to stay in the mid-level program and donors that are going to upgrade to a major giving program as well.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else want to add to that, Jason or Jacqueline?
I totally agree with Dermot, and I think it's important as we're engaging with relationships that we see beyond the transaction of making a gift into what is the true relationship we're building with the donors. And this is a really great place to live into that. So I totally agree with what you said, Dermot.
Great, thanks. In terms of metrics, we talked a little bit about metrics for mid-level acquisition and cost. What measure of resources should be allocated to developing mid-level? Is there any suggestions around that you all could provide?
Yeah, I would say that first there needs to be a commitment by leadership that mid-level programming is a priority. And it's not if you're building a mid-level program with the expectation that you are going to be able to acquire gifts very quickly or rapidly, that's really not the reason for building a mid-level program. The reason for building a mid-level program is establishing relationships with donors, understanding who they are, the type of impact they want to have with the organization, and really building out that pipeline. I would say that when you take a look and you think about the investment that you're looking to make in a mid-level program, mid-level gift officers, typically I've seen them range within, I would say, $50,000 to $70,000 as a gift officer. When you think about what would the cost be for hiring a mid-level gift officer, and then the appeals and the marketing that goes into that. When you think about that type of investment, it can be minimal based on the type of impact that you have and the revenue that you would look to receive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think, Dermont, you at the beginning, you really said something that's important. It's about leadership buy-in. So if there's a business plan, a strategy set up at the very beginning where both the development team as well as organizational leadership are all on the same page about what this program is, what it can bring in, and then that investment is scaled to support both the investment of the organization, but also the capacity within your donor base. So a shop of 10 people most certainly is not going to have 5 mid-level gift officers. So that's going to look slightly different for every organization.
Yep.
So we're about 1 minute over time. Jason, can you stay with us a little bit longer?
I've got maybe about 5-10 minutes.
Okay, we'll try to keep it to like 3 or 5. How about that? There's just so many questions. We're not going to be able to get to all of your questions, everyone, but we do promise to get to them over email, and certainly you will hear from us on that. We can definitely promise you that. So, and these questions are really great and very challenging too. So we are just starting out to formalize a mid-level giving program. Let me try that one more time. We are just starting out to formalize a mid-level program from our annual donors. Would you recommend reaching out to a mid-level donor right after they have made an annual gift? Can you give an example of a phone strategy? What would a phone strategy look like in that case?
I think I'll try and tackle this. Absolutely, I would recommend reaching out to a mid-level donor or someone that you've identified as a new mid-level donor. First of all, I think stewardship is incredibly important in mid-level fundraising, and being able to reach out to that donor and thank them for their involvement in their gift is critically important. From a timing perspective, you want to do that as quickly as possible, and when you do that, you want to let them know what they've been a part of and how they've made a difference. And so I think it's important from a mid-level perspective to have a strategy that not only includes asking donors or inviting donors to participate in your mission and give to the organization, but having a strategy that includes proper thanking and stewarding, and a strategy that includes reporting back on the impact of their giving.
Well, and I would add too that it's never too late to talk with a donor. If you've missed a window, don't not talk with them. Continue to call, continue to engage. But we've found that you've got about 24 hours where they've just made their gift. They still think about, oh, I just made my gift. I remember it just happened, where they're more reticent to pick up the phone when you call. We've called donors as early as like 5 minutes after they gave. We saw the gift came in, it just happened, and that's been a positive experience. So donors love to be thanked, and you've got a 24-hour window to get the most out of that thank you, but it's never too late to say thank you. We've called donors 5 years after their gift and said thank you. So don't feel like you have to wait.
I agree, Jason. I think just a lot of times your reaction when you call to thank someone is, you're thanking me for my gift? You know, it's in sheer shock that we would take the time to call them and thank them for their gift, especially at an annual giving level. So that it's only compounded if you can do that more quickly after the gift is made. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. So let's take one more question. I want to be mindful of everybody's time, let's see here. I'm trying. There's so many that I'm trying to just sift through them. So let's see here. So we are just. Oh, I did read that one. Okay, perfect. Did you do mid-level solicitations over the phone, and is that preceded by a direct mail solicitation? So we've already sort of talked about that, but anything else you want to add around that topic?
What we found the most powerful is the voice-to-voice. So we've made solicitations before mailings have landed. We've made solicitations without mailings. The point is to talk with your donors and challenge your donors. The solicitation letter is a tool to use to make that process more effective, but you got to talk to them. That's my only little passion.
And we have a follow-up question to that. Oh, so sorry, Dermot, go for it.
Sarah, I would add to that. Oftentimes, donors are looking to be invited to give to a particular project. And so oftentimes, asking donors over the phone is something that we as gift officers are often hung up over. And so it's really important to invite that donor to give to where they have a genuine need to give, because giving to that donor is something that they want to do.
And what tips would you recommend to make calls more successful?
So, in my experience, when calling a donor, it's important that you have a variety of means for connecting with that donor, whether it's calling to thank that donor, calling to share an update on a project that they're interested in or that they've supported in the past, and including in calls to invite them to give and support the organization as well. So where I've seen success is, first of all, having a specific purpose for a call. And if you're calling to thank a donor, let it be about thanking the donor. Don't call a donor and say, thank you for giving to our project, and then say, we would like for you to support this new initiative that we have. It's important to really focus on the purpose for that call at that particular time. But there are many, many reasons why you would call a donor and help them to feel like a partner.
Great. Well, I think that concludes our session today. And again, we'll be in touch answering the rest of our other questions that have been submitted. A huge thank you to Jason. Thank you so much. Your information was so valuable and insightful to everyone, and Dermot and Jacqueline as well. And to everyone joining us, we look forward to hearing from you, and we will be in touch. So thank you so much, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you all.